Hello and welcome to my presentation on extending your JavaScript toolbox. My name is Drew Fatler, and today we're going to be talking about using modern JavaScript to develop apps faster. So, sorry if my voice is a little raspy. I was singing backup for Alicia at the Dreamfest, so hopefully I can make it all the way through. I work for Synaptic AP, and we have an app called Eureka that's on the App Exchange. It is a tool for building smart forms for mobile workforces. It allows users to build surveys and assessments that their team can fill out on mobile devices. It's a very JavaScript-heavy front end that we're working on, and so we learned a lot about this process of working with JavaScript and how to manage that data on the front end. So today I'm going to be describing for you some of what we learned through that process and how we were able to upgrade to use modern JavaScript and build out a tool chain that allowed us to do faster and more efficient development. So that's what we're going to be running through today. First, a few takeaways from the presentation. I want you to have an understanding of the benefits of using a local development server and how that's going to speed things up for you and improve the developer experience. Second, we're going to look at quickly implementing this so that you can take this home and put this in one of the projects that you're working on right now and have it set up in like 10 minutes. Third, we're going to be jump-starting your usage of modern JavaScript. A lot of the JavaScript ecosystem has changed a ton over the last couple years. And so with that, it can be very intimidating for people that have not yet upgraded to use these new tool chains and upgraded to use the new language features that are available. So as I describe some of that, it's confusing because it's been referred to as so many different things, whether it's ES 2015 and beyond, ES 6, JavaScript next. I'm going to try to stick with just modern JavaScript, and that'll mean like any of the newer features in the language. And so we're going to talk about how you can gradually implement these into your own team processes. Also, we're going to be looking at quickly deploying optimized JavaScript code. That means having it minified and obfuscated if you need it to be, and having that all set for your production apps. Cool. So there are a few assumptions. This is a short presentation. I don't have a ton of time, so we're going to assume a couple things are set up. First is that you have a developer org. Secondly, we're going to be working with Sublime Text and have the Maven's Made app installed in that. Now, Maven's Made is actually no longer supported, but this is a piece where we're just saving our files to the Salesforce server. So you can do this any way that you're currently doing it now. If you do have Maven's Made set up with Sublime, you'll be able to use some of the quick tricks that I'll show you in the presentation. Otherwise, it's no big deal. You'll just be saving your Visualforce pages, Apex controllers, and static resources manually. Also, we're going to assume that you have NPM and Node.js installed globally on your machine. Cool. So in coding, it's not always better to keep adding. In fact, eliminating items is something that can be very beneficial to your project. So today we're going to be eliminating a few things. First of all, if you've ever seen this server save, it can take anywhere from like 3 seconds to 20 minutes, and that really can slow down your development process. So when we're working with JavaScript, we don't actually need to compile that on the Salesforce server. We're just sending a static resource up there. So when we're working locally, there's no reason to save that JavaScript to the Salesforce server. So today we're going to be setting up that local dev server so you have like a 20 millisecond save versus multiple seconds or minutes going back to the Salesforce server. The second thing we're going to be eliminating are a ton of scripts in our header tag on our Visualforce page. It usually starts by adding jQuery, and then you add a jQuery library, and then before you know it, you have like 10 different scripts that are included on your page. We're going to minimize that and have only one script that we're loading in for JavaScript when we get to the end of the talk. The third thing we're going to look at eliminating is custom JavaScript in our HTML. When I work with a lot of our junior developers, they come in and maybe they're more focused on the Apex side of things. So when they start working in JavaScript, they're doing their custom JavaScript just in a script tag on their Visualforce page. We really should be moving that off into static resources. And when we're working with it locally, having multiple files of JavaScript, it just makes it a lot easier to read. We don't have 200 lines of JavaScript in our HTML, and it's much easier to work with and reason about as you're working with other teammates and doing the development. So jumping into how our tool chain is going to work today, the first thing that we're going to be using is Webpack. Now, Webpack is a module bundler, so if you're using different scripts that you're including and multiple JavaScript pages, it bundles everything together to have a single output that you will use in your code. It also has a built-in development server, and so that's the main thing that we're going to be using with Webpack today. Next up, we have Babel. So when we're writing in our modern JavaScript, not all browsers support this, especially if you're working with older browsers, Internet Explorer. A lot of these features aren't going to be working right out of the box. And so we're going to use Babel to take that modern JavaScript, transpile it back so that it runs on any browser. And with Babel, one of the cool things about it is that we can just write the older style JavaScript and start adding in little bits of the more modern JavaScript, whether it's an arrow function or template strings. As you start feeling more and more comfortable with the modern features, you can just start using them. And you don't have to totally jump into this brand new syntax that may not make sense. You can just use little bits and pieces along the way. The last piece of it is going to be jQuery. So this is something we're going to install through NPM. Webpack's going to bundle it right into our bundle.js file. It's not that exciting, of course. We're just using a simple app today. But what I want to point out here is that if you're looking at using more advanced frameworks like React or Vue.js or Angular, it's very easy to substitute that into this tool chain instead of using jQuery. Cool. So let's get things up and running. Again, with our prerequisites, we're in a dev org. We have a Maven's Mate project created. With that project comes a Visualforce page that I've created, a controller that's querying a couple accounts, and then also a static resource that I've already built. And if at any point this gets confusing, I will be sharing a resource on my GitHub profile, and you can refer back to that. It's got a blog post that runs through all this stuff as well, so you can check back there later as well. Also, again, Node and NPM are installed globally. So we're going to take a look at our package.json and Webpack config that is in that GitHub repo, and then we're going to NPM install everything. So let's jump over to GitHub. This is just the repo that I created for this presentation. And you can see here's that blog that I mentioned that it runs you through exactly what I'm talking about today. So you can reference this later on. I've also included a number of files that I'm using today that you can then just copy and paste into your project. So we have a package.json and a Webpack config that I'm going to pull into the project right now. And so when we jump over to the code, we'll start in our package.json. There's a few pieces which you can adjust for your projects, including the name and version and that. We also have the scripts. I'll dig a little bit into the scripts later because we are going to be using NPM scripts to run in our terminal. And down here is kind of the most important piece, where we're creating the manifest of packages that we're going to be downloading from NPM and using in our project. We have the dev dependencies, so when we're working on the project, these are the items that we need to have, which include Babel and Webpack and our dev server in there. And also then we have our regular dependencies, so when the end user is in production and actually clicking on things, they're accessing jQuery and Draggable. So we can start here by pulling in, doing our npm install. And so again, this is pulling from that manifest of packages we have and pulling them down into our project. And while this is running, I'm going to jump over to Webpack config. And so this is configuring our Webpack server. The main things that you need to see here are that we have an entry point of our app.js, which is in our app directory, and then we're outputting to a bundle.js file. we also have the watch on, so anytime we change a JavaScript file, it's going to recompile everything locally on that dev server. And to do that, it's looking for any changes to JS files. Now, this is kind of done for you, so you can just copy this in. You don't have to change any of this code as long as you're not changing the file names, in which case you would just update these references here. So it's really easy to make some custom updates if you'd like to. So now we've finished our npm install, I believe. And so we have everything running there. Yeah, I've finished up. Cool. So I'll jump over and show you the app that we'll be demoing as part of this process so you have kind of an idea of what we're looking at. So on this page, I'm just pulling in some accounts and using Lightning Design System to create cards for them. And as they appear on the page, I'm just going to pull them into some different prioritization areas. So today I'm going to be calling Burlington Textiles. I need to send an email to Dickinson PLC, also an email to GenePoint, and I'm hoping to close with Edge Communications. And so I just drag these around throughout the day. It's kind of like maybe a little Trello thing if you're used to working with that. This is very simple, though, like I mentioned. It's not, actually the data does not persist. So if some homework, you can maybe figure out how to save that data back to Salesforce and have it persist. But I'll show some code now of what that looks like to build out this project. So here is my Visualforce page. And starting up at the top, this is kind of the not ideal scenario that I see when I'm working with some of our junior developers that are just getting started. They're throwing that custom JavaScript into the script tag, which is at the top of our HTML. They're also including jQuery and Draggable up here. And that's some things that we're going to improve with this process. So taking a look at our presentation again, we're going to start optimizing some things now. And so with optimizing, we're going to install that jQuery package through npm, which we did in that npm install. I'm then going to get rid of the inline JavaScript that we saw on that Visualforce page, and then we're going to start up our local dev server and have everything running locally. So let's start with some optimization. So we're just going to cut this piece out. We're also going to eliminate these script tags that we no longer need. I'm going to go over to our app.js and paste in that Visualforce remoting call. And we have some other pieces to our HTML that are getting added in here as well. So some of the newer stuff that you may see that wasn't on that previous page is we're now using some of the modern JavaScript features. So we're importing in jQuery. We're also importing in Draggable and starting to use them. We're using some arrow functions, constants as well. Also, we're doing template strings down here. So these are some of the small features you can start adding as you feel comfortable and understand what they're doing. This could totally be written in older syntax of JavaScript and still work exactly the same. So you don't have to use the ES6 features when it's working with Babel. You can just use any sort of JavaScript syntax that you're used to and comfortable with writing. Another thing I want to point out is how we're using Visualforce remoting. So if you haven't used Visualforce remoting before, it's like a pipeline from your Apex code directly into your JavaScript context. So it makes things really easy when you're doing these JavaScript-heavy applications. So with using that, I'm simply calling out to this Apex function, which is our Visualforce remoting accounts call, and then we get the results. Once we get the results, I'm creating some HTML that we're going to later append to the page. So this is our function for generating that HTML, and you can see we're using the Lightning Design System. So this is the boilerplate code for that. We're inserting some JavaScript functions or variables into our template string, and all of that then gets appended to our JS accounts class in the Visualforce page. Also then, I'm just initializing the draggable. So as you saw me dragging those cards around the screen, that's what this draggable library is doing here. Cool. So we have this in our app.js file, which is in our app directory. And as I mentioned, Webpack config that's where this is looking to. Something we could have done to improve this is move these functions into their own files. We're keeping it simple today, so it's just in one app.js file. But we could have moved them to a file and then imported them into this page, similar to the way we did with jQuery up here, and Webpack would bundle that all together. So let's get running with our dev server. And for that, actually, sorry, we're going to jump back to our package.json to look at this npm script that we're going to run. So we want to start the server, and this is an alias for a more complex terminal string. So we're running Webpack dev server, and we're adding the HTTPS flag for that. So to run this, we run npm run server. So I can go over to my terminal to do that. And when we kick this off, Webpack starts. And so it's running now. And we can see that it's running at localhost 880. Now, if we were not working in Salesforce context, we could build out our whole page at this localhost site. But because we're in the Salesforce context, we need to figure out a way to reference the files that are running on this localhost in our Visualforce page. And it turns out that that is actually very easy to do. Down at the bottom of my Visualforce page, I've simply included a script that points to our bundle.js on our localhost 880. And this is all I need to do to be able to pull in that file that's running on our local development server. So to show you that in our application, if I open up the console and go over to sources, we can see that our bundle.js has loaded in. And this is the file that Webpack has created that pulls in the jQuery, the Drago library, and all that code we wrote in our app.js. So now that we have it running locally, I can show you those really quick saves and focus on making our development more efficient. So on our page, I don't like this new button, and I also don't like these footers. They're just not necessary. So let's go ahead and update our app in the HTML to get rid of that. So here's our footer. We'll drop that. And then our new button, we can get rid of that too. I'll hit save, jump back to our app, and we can see it's already reloaded. Our new button's gone and our footer's gone. We didn't have to save back to Salesforce to do that. It just registered on our local development server and made updates to our page immediately. Cool. So now that we've done development, we're complete, ready to push it to production. This is really quick as well. We're going to go back to our terminal. We'll kill the server that was running, and we'll run our next command, which from our package.json is the npm run prod bundle. And this is going to bundle and optimize our JavaScript code. And so once I run that, it kicks everything off. And so now it's been bundled. It's actually accessing this file, which copies from our bundle.js and puts it and updates our static resource. So now that our static resource is updated, I can go over to it, hit save, and this is where we actually need to push our static resource up to the Salesforce server. And so now it should be accessible. I can go back to our Visualforce page, comment out that localhost, and comment in our bundle.js. And so now we're going to be pointing to a static resource instead of the localhost. Hit save there. And once that completes, we'll go back to our application. We'll reload, and everything should be working. Now we see that the localhost is no longer loading in. We can go to our resources, and we should have one for our bundle resource here. And so this was that file that has been compiled and minified, and you can see it's now all on one line, and it's going to be running fast. Cool. So we've used our local development server, pushed everything back to Salesforce, and switched over to production. And so our app is ready to go. Okay. Cool. So here are some resources for understanding all the tools that were involved in this process. At the top, again, is that GitHub repo where we have the full blog post that runs you through all of the different steps in detail. I also have the Webpack docs, Node.js, where you can download Node and NPM and have that running globally on your system. the ES6 features. So this is where you can check out some of those modern JavaScript, the new syntax that's available there. Also, the Maven's Mate GitHub repo. Quick shout out to Joe and his team there for having maintained this project for so long, and it's been really helpful to the Salesforce community. Also, the Babel.js docs are available there. And so that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for attending. Again, there's that GitHub repo that you can check out. And if you have any questions or anything, or it's not working for you for some reason, you can open up an issue on that GitHub, and I can respond back to you and probably help you move through so that you can get things up and running on your own. So thanks so much for attending. I'll be hanging out for a little bit if anybody has any additional questions. Also, Sarah Nettles is up next. So make sure you hang out for that. She's going to be talking about making Lightning components really fast, and Sarah's awesome, so you should hang around for that too. Thank you.